Joining us, journalist and Middle Eastern analyst Nabila Ramdani and Matthew Syed from The Times. Good evening and welcome. Thanks for joining us. First of all, just your reflection on the headlines we had tonight about this nerve gas being detected, being moved around Syria. I mean, this would be a huge escalation on the diplomatic and military front, presumably. Yes, indeed. It's an extremely worrying development that, as you were mentioning earlier, chemical weapons have been moved to the city of Homs. Now, of course, the huge concern is if it's going to be used and by who, because if it falls into the wrong hands, then the government could also manipulate this and say, well, it's been used by terrorist groups. And it can genuinely be used by terrorist groups who get hold of it. So that's, you know, we should bear that in mind. Yeah, I mean, that's the other worry, Matthew, isn't it? That with the uncertainty about control in general there, if this is actually on the loose, if you like, that's a worrying development. Well, extremely worrying. I suppose the only positive, and it's a very moderate positive, is that it might at last galvanise the international community to reach some kind of unanimity in the Security Council that has been conspicuous by its absence. You mean Russia and China? Russia and China have not played ball at all. And the fact that this is so volatile, that these weapons with the capability to inflict extraordinary human carnage is in the offing, we might actually get a consensus. I mean, it's for me, and I think many others, it's making a mockery of international diplomacy. Yeah. Well, let's reflect on the papers. We haven't as yet got the international coverage of that story, but if I press my button again to try and bring up the eye, I've got a grey blob on the screen, which is right. Let's try the Independent. We'll get that on screen, and there's another grey blob, which is rather technology. Yes, I know. Daily Mail and grey blob. Never mind. Let's reflect that the Eye and the Independent, however, is going on the John Terry story. FA under pressure after Terry's cleared of racism, it says. And the indication is that the FA has to decide what to do now, because, of course, they stripped him of the captaincy. And at the time, Capello said, surely this man is innocent until proven guilty. Well, I was astonished that, for what it's worth, that John Terry got the captaincy in the first place. It was a hostage to fortune. As soon as he got the armband, he's been stripped, he got it back, stripped again. I think that the magistrate's statement was a rational one. Both sides accepted in this case that the racist epithet had been used. Terry said it had been used sarcastically, and the magistrate felt that he couldn't be absolutely sure that Terry wasn't telling the truth, and therefore with the threshold of guilt that is in the criminal case beyond reasonable doubt. Yeah. Now the issue for the FA is twofold. One, the question for Roy Hodgson about whether or not Terry gets back the armband. If they were taking my advice, I'd say definitely don't do it. But the other question is whether to reinitiate the FA's investigation into Terry, because it is possible, given that the threshold is far lower, balance of probabilities, that he may be found guilty. Let's not forget Luis Suarez. Like a civil action, i.e. that the burden of proof has to be far less. Exactly. I suppose the one other issue with all of this is that independent of the racist allegation, both players admitted that the prelude to that epithet was a whole range of malicious, personally wounding, profane statements from other, and they said it was normal. The use of the language, well, is it not, should it be normal, and is it actually what you want an England captain to be saying on the pitch? I mean, one can't imagine, and I'm going back here quite a while, Bobby Moore, England captain, behaving in that way on a football pitch. Well, do you know, it did astonish me that they both characterised it as normal footballing verbals. I mean, if that is the way that players are talking to each other on the pitch, you do see players using swear words to referees when they don't like the decisions. Now, for me, that shows a real severe cultural problem within the game, and it's something that I'd like to see referees get a grip of. I mean, certainly if a player abuses the ref, they should get sent off. And I think if they overhear this kind of malicious, personally wounding insults, they ought to get a grip of that. Well, one of the suggestions was maybe a sin bin, like they got in rugby. You know, get them off the pitch for 10 minutes to cool down and bring them back on. Well, I think, you know, at the end of the day, the law really decided on this matter, and there was not enough evidence, no categorical evidence that what Terry was saying was indeed racist. And I think if we look at the Suarez case, the Liverpool player who used racist language against the Man U player Fabrice Evra, I think he was dealt with in a more level-headed manner through the Football Association. And not taking it to criminal court. And not taking to the Crown Court.
if you know, to put somebody through criminal court is much more of an unpleasant ordeal. And there I say there is something of a show trial about this case.
Yeah. And of course, Anton Ferdinand and Ashley Cole reflected that they didn't really want to be there.
Yeah, they did.
That in this way.
You're right about that, and I totally can understand where you're coming from. But I just feel that given the context, football was a recruiting ground for the far right for decades. Given the fact that we've moved on so far as a society, but we need nevertheless to still be vigilant, given that there are still social data indicating that some level of racism exists.
We were quite sniffy about Ukraine and Poland and the troubles over there, about racism and so on. You know, is there still a hidden problem in this country that we're not addressing?
No, but I think more crucially, the context was that John Terry comes with a great deal of baggage. He has been involved in trouble and on several occasions, and he has got great exposures because of that. But let's be perfectly honest about that. If an ordinary member of the public goes and reports a crime against a member of an ethnic minority, the police, in the vast majority of cases, wouldn't give him 5 minutes, let alone take the case to the Crown Prosecution Service. And that's what I mean when I say there's an element of a show trial. There's something about we're developing a celebrity tier for justice, which is unhealthy.
That's an interesting reflection. One law for us and another law for them.
Absolutely.
So, on the Independent as well, we've got the latest on LIBOR, who knew what, when, or didn't, and maybe, and didn't pass it on, or could have, and it just goes on and on and on.
Well, the thing is, Mervyn King, why didn't he mention this a few days ago?
Yeah, because his statement was, "Oh, this is all a surprise to me," and it's not very good, is it?
Well,
we ought to be looking into this, and
it doesn't sound at all credible, and I'm surprised he didn't mention this email exchange that he had with the US authorities. I mean, you can kind of. The distinction that Bob Diamond tried to draw between the manipulation of LIBOR to try and demonstrate to the markets that Barclays wasn't about to go under and to cause a run on the bank at a time of maximum sensitivity.
Well, it was emergency measures, really, wasn't it, after the collapse of Lehman Brothers?
Exactly, precisely. I mean, I can understand the distinction between that and manipulating LIBOR in order to increase profitability and traders getting higher bonuses. But my sense of all this is that there is something seriously lacking in a moral sense in the value system within the banks, not just in terms of manipulating LIBOR, not just in terms of complex derivatives, not just in terms of the fact that they have admitted to ripping off certain wholesale clients and to a certain extent retail clients. I mean, all of that, the accumulation of all that says that within the banks there's obviously a culture where people say, I've been doing this, and instead of being held up for what might be thought of as ethically dubious, people saying, well, that's fine, if you can get away with it,
what
that's
was the phrase, my word is my bond? It was the sort of code of honour in the city, if you like.
So do you think there should be firmer and perhaps clearer ethical regulations?
I think regulation, and in the same way as the criminal law, can only do so much. I mean, if the criminal law operates in civil society, it is a good bulwark against bad behaviour, but most of the time it's us just recognising that we have to do what we say and that we have to tell the truth and treat other people with a certain level of civility. If you had to police every kind of individual behaviour, the regulatory burden would bankrupt any society. It's the same with regulation.
We then get the charge, red tape is actually suffocating our ability to come back and get the economy moving again and so on. So, let's take a look at the Eye, the sister paper, and apologies for our iPad being a bit sticky at the moment, but I think we can have a look there. That, of course, is the Independent, rather, is what we've just seen, and the Eye is there. And we've got top left-hand corner then reference to Mervyn King there. And I mean, the other question is, clearly, if you're the governor of the banking, surely you should know what's going on, even if you haven't got the direct evidence. You need to keep your ear to the ground pretty close.
Exactly. Yes. Mervyn King, I mean, he does seem like a safe pair of hands. Whenever you see him in front of a select committee, whenever you see him making that speech at the Mansion House, I'm really surprised. He must have known.
Because they say he's only got to raise his eyebrow, and people do things like Bob Diamond resigning.
Well, exactly. It just goes to show that his confidence is something that is absolutely necessary for any head of a retail or investment bank.
Daily Mail. We've got front page of the Daily Mail to take a look at now. And this is, well, Olympic security again. We've got the troops coming to fill the gaps now. It's police.
That's the new line, yes. That more police officers will now will be involved to manage the security around the Olympic Games, and it adds further pressure on Theresa May, who is currently under pressure and blamed for mismanaging the whole event effectively.
Yeah, I mean, but is it something that's rather more serious as well, in that the reliance on the private sector to get us out of trouble, PFI initiatives, building hospitals, and then suddenly, when the bubble bursts, it's us, the taxpayer, presuming it has to come in and fill the gap by getting public services to come to the rescue.
I think that's a very powerful point.
Yeah, and especially since the private sector doesn't come cheap as well.
Was it 280 million this was costing
and
to hire G4S?
It's a PR disaster, an absolute catastrophe for G4S, and for good reason. And just to widen the context a bit, I mean, the Olympics is supposed to be something which is a celebration of the human spirit, if you believe the propaganda and the PR, something which is rather fun to watch and enjoy. And I love it as a sports journalist, but even before I went into journalism, I loved the Olympic Games. There is something rather striking and jarring about going to an Olympic venue. Since the massacre in Munich,
1972.
The totalitarian apparatus of security, it's even more severe than going into an aeroplane.
Well, look at our headlines tonight. RAF to shoot planes out of the sky. Navy steams up the Thames with an aircraft
like a country
carrier.
At war, frankly.
Yeah.
But having said all of that, from the point of view of the authorities, trying to draw that balance between making it an experience which is uplifting and enjoyable on the one hand, but recognising that it is a perfect platform for any terrorist organisation to get the oxygen of publicity all around the world. That balance is so difficult, and bringing in the private sector, the fact that that has gone horribly wrong, if something happens at the Games, it's going to make it...
The finger pointing will start.
Exactly. It could be a political catastrophe.
Just last reflection then. Boris Becker going broke, question mark. Well, if Boris is going broke, there's no hope for the rest of us, is there really? Times are tough. I mean, page 38 and 39,
exactly.
It's deep inside.
It's deep in the page. I mean, it's a good front page pick. I'm rather surprised it made the front page of the story, but you're absolutely right. Becker made tens of millions as a sportsman. He's done rather well as a pundit. I mean, he's on the Beeb for the Wimbledon coverage. I think he still has a column in one of the national newspapers. He's a huge star in Germany.
And he's pictured with his wife, which might be an indication that she might be the cause of him going broke.
I see. Game, set and match.
It could be the paternity payments that he's going to make for the... no, that's unfair.
Love 30 million. We shall see. Anyway, more papers to come in, and hopefully a fixed iPad as well. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us for the press preview. Well, I've had my software updated, so I can press some buttons now, and something may happen. Shazam! There we go. See? I told you. Daily Telegraph.
Magical.
Magical, indeed it is. 40-mile-per-hour rural speed limit. Easier for councils to reduce limit on country roads. Thank goodness they're on our side. Well, there's the image, what we were just talking about with the Olympics. This is the airspace being closed ahead of the Olympics with snipers from the Royal Air Force Regiment demonstrating one aspect of lethal force in operation. It is a bit worrying, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. It looks absolutely daunting. And I don't think those security stories usually come to the fore when it comes to the organisation of huge events and organising the security around them. But I think in this instance it did because of the failure of the private company.
But
I don't think we would be aware of...
But what is unquestionable is over the next fortnight there are going to be dozens of stories about the Olympic Games. Ticket scandals, security, the closure of the elevator section on the M4, I think it's open again.
Or even as the Matt cartoon says, like a sniffer. You forgot to train any sniffer dogs, so there's Private Jones on the floor sniffing the handbag. You've
got to hand it to Matt. He always nails it.
Absolutely. Well, another aspect: empty desks among Heathrow queues, because that's the other element of it. Passengers arriving at Heathrow have continued to face long delays because of failure to deliver on ministerial promise to man all immigration desks at peak times.
And that is just such a huge frustration, particularly for people who've just come in on long-haul flights to get to the terminal. It is, I mean, it happens at a lot of countries other than the UK, but this has been a really, really big PR disaster for people coming in and having to endure it.
Let's take a look at the Daily Mirror, one of the red tops, which has got the story about the Tetra Pak heir, Hans Christian Rausing, being held on suspicion of murder and continuing inquiries. Which is an extraordinary story.
It's rather chilling, actually.
Yeah. He's actually too sick to be questioned at the moment because indicated he's an addict. Cleared Terry and FA Pro, that's familiar fare there. An Olympics 2012 Guide to the Greatest Showman. Now that's more of the sort of approach we want to see, Matthew, isn't it? The sort of celebration of the sporting event.
Yeah, and I rather wonder whether the chronology will be 14 days largely dominated by negative news stories surrounding the Olympics, and then once it starts, there is a shift, a dramatic shift, where we focus in on the athletes, a few gold medals for Team GB, and then a certain level of
change.
I think the mood will change,
right.
And I think there will be a genuine sense of celebration, a fascination with a lot of sports that people are not used to seeing, given the monopolisation of football, you know, fencing, archery, table tennis,
beach volleyball,
beach volleyball.
Just throw that in.
But don't you think in the meantime
it may be the only beach we see, perhaps, if we look at the Express, because summer holidays get even cheaper. Free frisbee as well to go on your holiday. They're talking about pound against the euro, and it is actually at long last looking as if it might be cheaper to go abroad than stay here in Britain. So
it's about time.
£1 is now worth €1.27. But I suppose the other aspect,
especially in the European countries which are performing less well.
Greece needs the currency. Although obviously, perhaps some people in this country reflecting the money needs to be spent here, given the awful summer we've had so far. The other aspect of the sports story, I think you spotted in the eye, or was it? Rangers sent down to third division. There it is at the bottom there. This is an extraordinary decision, isn't it, to make them start from the bottom again?
It's such a difficult decision to take, because on the one hand, there needs to be a deterrent for football clubs who overextend themselves or who are poorly managed. If there's just a slap on the wrist and you stay up at the top, in the top flight, then what is the deterrent to behaving in a way which is financially unsustainable?
This is a boot in the nether region, isn't it, rather than a slap on the wrist?
This is a bit, but it will throw up all sorts of rather curious ironies of Rangers visiting away teams with capacities or average attendances in the hundreds rather than thousands. I mean, it will,
especially if they get beaten.
Yeah, exactly. Highly unlikely, but yeah, that would throw cannonballs.
But following the Terry trial, isn't that an example of the real problems faced by football clubs, the chronic financial irregularities, and that the fact that it could affect any club, including Chelsea?
It's not just a game anymore, absolutely. Matthew, Nabila, thank you very much indeed. Apologies for our hiccups, what we got there. More coming up on Sky News at 10. Stay with us.